Before we begin, imagine standing in front of a creature so large its shadow alone makes generals tremble, and knowing it would kill anyone for you without hesitation. If that sent chills down your spine, hit like, comment your thoughts on human-animal loyalty, and subscribe for more brutal sci-fi stories like this one. The great chamber of the Galactic Council shimmered with refracted light. Ancient obsidian columns twisted into the vaulted ceiling, embedded with blue glowing runes that pulsed in sync with the planet's molten core far below. Along the crescent dais, the counselors of 10 different species sat draped in ceremonial robes and layered armor, their gazes locked on the massive double doors opening with a vibrating groan. The human entered with deliberate, heavy steps. His boots echoed on polished stone, silencing the murmur of translators and aides. Marcus Vane stood broad-shouldered and tall, clad in dark tactical fabric streaked with dirt and dried blood. Scar lines cut across his cheek and jaw, the grizzled stubble there lending him a savage gravitas that made the younger guards avert their eyes. His short-cropped hair was uneven, clearly hacked away in the field. Yet it was not Marcus that froze the council in collective dread. It was the creature padding beside him, claws clicking softly on the marble. The dire wolf dwarfed any predator they had known on their homeworlds. Its head rose above Marcus's shoulders when it walked. Dense fur rippled with each muscle shift, a blend of slate, white and black that looked like shadows under moonlight. Its silver eyes glowed faintly beneath the chamber lights, scanning every being present with cold, silent intelligence. Its nostrils flared, tasting alien scents and electromagnetic pulses. Counselor Thrall of the Zalith, a reptilian male with emerald scales and gold-set fangs, leaned forward in his throne. His voice slithered through the echo chamber, carried by amplifiers into every translator device present. "Human Marcus Vane, you enter this hall armed with a death beast," he hissed, forked tongue flicking in distaste. "Do you intend to threaten this council?" Marcus did not stop walking until he stood directly before them, the dire wolf sitting beside him with perfect discipline. Its massive head turned to follow Thrall's slightest movement, ears twitching with predatory focus. Marcus's face remained unreadable, pale blue eyes scanning across the gathered counselors before settling on Thrall. "He's not a weapon," Marcus said, his voice rough but calm. "He's my companion." A ripple of unease swept through the chamber. The avian counselor perched on her crystal seat clicked her beak nervously. A tusked warlord in bronze ceremonial armor shifted in discomfort. But Counselor Thrall leaned further forward, curiosity mixing with his disdain. "A companion?" Thrall's claws tapped his throne armrest. "You sit beside an apex predator, a frostclaw dire wolf from the death world of Thrace Prime. They hunt adult drakons in mated pairs. They shred armored convoy transports for warmth in the carcass. And you call it companion?" Marcus reached into a pouch on his tactical belt, pulling out a thick ration bar the size of his palm. Without breaking eye contact with Thrall, he unwrapped it, revealing dense nutrient-packed meat and carbohydrate layers. The dire wolf's ears perked, eyes shifting from Thrall to Marcus's hand. Marcus extended it casually. The wolf leaned forward, jaws opening to reveal teeth thicker than a human wrist. It closed its mouth gently around the bar, the tips of its fangs brushing against Marcus's gloved fingers with careful precision. A low, pleased rumble vibrated its chest as it chewed, eyes half closing in contentment. The entire chamber fell into heavy silence. The youngest council aide, a thin male amphibian with pale skin, whispered too loudly to his master, "It could have taken his arm off." Counselor Thrall's golden eyes narrowed, slits contracting into predatory focus. "It chooses not to. That is worse." Marcus let his hand drop to rest on the wolf's massive shoulder. Beneath his calloused palm, he felt power coiled like a drawn bow. Kale, as he called the dire wolf, shifted his weight subtly, pressing into the touch with an animal intimacy that was neither tamed obedience nor fearful submission. It was trust, deep, bone-carved trust. Thrall tilted his scaled head, flicking his tongue again. "Tell me, human. How did you enslave such a creature? Electroshock conditioning? Hormonal inhibitors? Neural implants?" Marcus's jaw tightened at the word enslave. His thumb brushed against Kale's thick fur, feeling old scars beneath. Plasma burns healed by time and battlefield grit, bite wounds from alien predators, claw marks from brutal dominance fights among its own kind. He took a slow breath before replying. "I didn't enslave him. I earned his loyalty." Counselor Thrall sat back with a flick of his clawed hand, dismissing the explanation as sentimental nonsense. "All animals bow to dominance and punishment. Even yours." The dire wolf's ears flattened against its skull as if understanding Thrall's tone, a silent snarl vibrating through its chest. Counselor Thrall did not flinch. His own species was apex on their world. He had stared down warlords and executioners. But as the wolf's silver eyes locked onto his, a tremor worked through the old Zalith's spine that he could not suppress. The human spoke again, his voice quiet but carrying a lethal finality. You misunderstand him. Punishment breeds fear. Fear breeds rebellion. Loyalty? Marcus let his fingers dig slightly into Kale's dense neck fur, feeling warm skin beneath. Loyalty breeds a protector. Kale's massive head turned to Marcus, snout brushing against his armored thigh. The wolf licked a streak of blood stain from his leg armor, cleaning it with slow, deliberate movements before lifting his gaze back to the counselors, eyes glowing with silent threat. Another counselor, a male from the insectoid Vesker species, chittered in alarm. You bring a killer here, human? We convene for peaceful negotiation, not intimidation. Marcus raised his eyes to the domed ceiling, exhaling slowly. How many times had he heard that in his years beyond human space? He looked back at them, gaze hardening to ice. You invited me here to discuss securing your frontier colonies from hive raiders and bloodclaw mercenaries. You wanted the Deathworlders on your side. This is what we are. Kale's ears flicked at the word, Deathworlders, as if recognizing the insult behind the title. His hackles rose slightly before settling back down as Marcus laid a firm hand behind his skull. The wolf shifted again, placing himself just slightly ahead of Marcus's boots, his hulking frame casting a shadow across Marcus's chest as if to shield him from unseen threats. Counselor Thrall's tail lashed behind his throne, gold rings clinking on each segment. It would kill for you, wouldn't it? He rasped softly, more to himself than to Marcus. Marcus's lips twitched in the barest hint of a smile. It was not the warmth of humor. It was the cold acknowledgement of an unbreakable truth. He didn't answer because he didn't need to. Kale's eyes fixed on Thrall's throat, unblinking. Somewhere to the left, the avian counselor's feathers rippled with agitation. Counselor Thrall, this is neither the time nor place for antagonizing the Deathworlder, she said in a fluting, anxious voice. But Thrall only leaned forward again, ignoring her. His slitted eyes glittered with an academic's curiosity overlaid by a warlord's unease. Tell me, human. If I ordered my guards to harm you right now, would it intervene before they drew blood? Marcus's gaze never wavered. You can find out. But understand, if you harm me you won't have to deal with him for long. Thrall's scaled brow lifted. Why is that? Marcus's expression flattened into a soldier's grim mask. Because you'll be dead before you feel his teeth. The silence that followed was not empty. It was dense and suffocating, thick with the combined breathlessness of dozens of beings. Kale huffed softly, tongue slipping out between his fangs to lick his jowls, as if tasting the charged tension in the air. Finally, Thrall reclined back in his throne, claws drumming again on his armrest. Very well, human. Let us continue these negotiations, with your companion present. Pray he remains well fed. Marcus said nothing, merely lowering himself to one knee beside Kale, scratching behind the wolf's ear where old scars had turned the skin thick and knotted. Kale closed his eyes, leaning into the touch with a deep, satisfied growl that reverberated up Marcus's arm and into his chest. For a moment, the entire Galactic Council witnessed something they could not name. It was not domination. It was not fear-based control. It was an unbreakable bond forged between two predators in a universe that neither forgave nor forgot. A bond built on mutual survival and silent promises, that if one fell, the other would rend the stars apart to avenge him. Counselor Thrall's golden eyes narrowed to slits. Quietly to his aide, he rasped words that sent an involuntary shiver through the boy's pale skin. That beast would kill for him, without hesitation. May the gods help us if it ever decides to kill for itself. Outside the council chamber, thunder rumbled across the planetary shields, lightning crackling down to the barren lands beyond. Inside, in the silent tension left by man and beast, the galaxy's oldest leaders felt for the first time what it meant to stand before a Deathworlder and his chosen brother. And that was only the beginning. The memory of biting winds burned in Marcus's mind with vivid, icy clarity. Even now, standing in the suffocating warmth of the council chamber, he felt the ghost of frost cutting into his skin. It had been 7 months ago on Thrace Prime, during a planetary survey and border security mission for the Colonial Defense Corps. His dropship had taken ground-to-air fire on approach. The pilot managed a controlled crash landing near the base of a glacial canyon, but the moment they skidded across the ice and metal screamed its death song, Marcus knew it would be days before extraction teams risked the blizzards to recover them. The world was classified as a Class V death world. Surface temperatures rarely rose above -40 degrees Celsius even in the noon sun. Winds reached 300 kilometers per hour at peak storms. The planet teemed with apex predators adapted to shred armored carapaces and gnaw through glacial bedrock to nest. Humanity had surveyed it for mineral deposits but left it uncolonized after 5 expeditions ended in body recovery operations. Marcus remembered crawling out of the ruined dropship, his helmet visor cracked and breath freezing in the air as vapor trails. Around him lay the mangled remains of his squad mates. Steam rose from torn bodies cooling rapidly. Blood froze in seconds on exposed steel. He'd torn away his shattered helmet, gasping in the thin, dry air. The storm winds whipped his face raw, but it was the silence that dug its claws into him. The silence of the dead and the silence of a world that did not care. Marcus scavenged what he could: rations, thermal blankets, and 2 plasma cartridges for his rifle, which sparked and flickered with compromised wiring. He didn't mourn the dead then. There was no time. Mourn later, survive now. That was the law of men who lived on death worlds. By the second day, the blizzard winds eased just enough for the sun to break through the iron clouds. The ice field blazed blinding white under a pale blue sky. Marcus trudged through knee-deep snow, scanning for any sign of the extraction beacon signal. He'd taken shelter the previous night in the wrecked cockpit, but predators had already begun to circle, sniffing burned metal for charred meat. That afternoon he saw his first glimpse of the dire wolf. At first he thought it was a trick of light, a shifting shadow at the edge of the ice cliffs. Then he saw it descend the slope with a hunter's precision, massive paws crunching across the snow without sinking deep. Its head was low, shoulders rolling like storm clouds, tail held straight for balance. Frost clung to its black and silver coat, and as it approached the dead dropship, Marcus could see the ragged scars crisscrossing its flanks. He'd raised his rifle slowly, the plasma coil whining with charged defiance. The wolf stopped, head tilting slightly, ears rotating forward as it studied him. For a moment, neither moved. The wind howled between them, carrying flakes of snow and the distant screeches of ice harpies circling overhead. Then the wolf lunged. Marcus fired. The bolt of plasma streaked past its shoulder, sizzling against the ice. He cursed his trembling hands, braced, and fired again. This time the blast seared across the wolf's side, vaporizing a strip of fur and burning into the flesh. The creature snarled in agony and rage, veering away before it could reach him. Blood spattered the snow in an arc of steaming crimson as it fled into the jagged ice canyons. Marcus exhaled shakily, his chest heaving. He knew it would return. Predators tested prey. If he died of exposure, it would feast without risk. That night, he barricaded himself in a narrow fissure between 2 cliff faces, covering the entrance with shards of metal debris. His breath plumed in the darkness, and he clutched his rifle to his chest, counting each slow second. Sleep came in jagged bursts, filled with dreams of the dire wolf's glowing eyes watching from just beyond the veil of snow. On the 4th day the storm rose again. Winds screamed down from the mountains, ripping ice shards free and scouring the canyon floors. Marcus stumbled against the gale, every exposed patch of skin numbing in seconds. His visor scanner flickered weakly, unable to maintain a stable reading. He followed the faint slope of the canyon, each step a battle against exhaustion and bitter, gnawing cold. When he collapsed near an overhang of frozen stone, he thought it was the end. He forced himself to crawl into the hollow, dragging his rifle and supplies behind him. His left hand felt like dead meat. He couldn't even flex his fingers anymore. Shivering violently, he tore open a ration bar and chewed without tasting, feeling the dense nutrients stick in his throat. That was when he heard it. A low, ragged growl echoed at the cave mouth. Marcus lifted his head slowly, vision blurred with frostbite and fatigue. The dire wolf stood there, half-shrouded in swirling snow. Blood matted its burned side, the plasma wound crusted with blackened scabs. Its ribs were visible through its thick coat, each breath rattling with strain. It did not attack him. Instead, it limped into the cave, one paw leaving dark spots on the ice as it collapsed heavily against the wall opposite Marcus. Its silver eyes flickered in the gloom, watching him with weary calculation. The growl died in its throat, replaced by deep, ragged breaths. Marcus forced himself upright, rifle clutched to his chest. The wolf did not move. Minutes passed, measured only by the ticking of his dying wrist scanner. The wind howled outside, battering the cave mouth with sheets of frozen sleet. Marcus finally lowered his weapon, staring at the creature that could have killed him hours ago. Smart choice, he croaked through cracked lips. Die out there, or die in here. The wolf exhaled a long plume of vapor, closing its eyes. That night Marcus did not sleep. He sat across from the predator, unable to tear his gaze away. The storm raged, temperatures plummeting to -60. When he saw the wolf begin to shiver, he shifted closer. Every survival manual screamed against it, but instinct overruled them. He unwrapped a second thermal blanket, dragging it over to cover the wolf's heaving chest. It snarled weakly, baring fangs stained yellow with old blood. Marcus didn't flinch. He draped the blanket and pressed his hand to its ribs, feeling the tremors beneath dense fur. The wolf's eyes locked on his, narrowed with confusion and hate and something else. Something flickering in the shadows behind pain. You die, I die, Marcus murmured, leaning against its side to share body heat. Simple math. The creature growled again, but it was softer, almost involuntary. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling exhaustion drag him down. His head rested against the wolf's massive shoulder, the rise and fall of its breath like a silent lullaby. For the first time in 4 days he felt warmth. When morning came, the storm had eased. Marcus woke with the wolf's muzzle pressed against his chest, hot breath seeping through his armor layers. Its ears flicked as he stirred, silver eyes blinking open. They stared at each other in silence. He tore open another ration bar, holding it out. The wolf bared its teeth in warning, hackles rising. Marcus didn't flinch. He waited, hand extended. After a long, frozen minute, the wolf's massive head lowered. It sniffed the bar, nostrils flaring, then snapped it up with careful precision, fangs brushing his glove with feather-like gentleness. Days passed like that. Marcus hunted small rock lizards and frost hares, skinning them with his combat knife and feeding the wolf first before roasting his own share over flickering plasma flames. The wolf never left his side. When ice scavengers descended in screeching flocks, it tore them from the sky, ripping wings and snapping necks with brutal efficiency. When he collapsed from fatigue, it lay curled around him, its thick fur sheltering him from the killing cold. He began calling it Kale, after an old Terran war deity known for slaughtering enemies to protect kin. It was easier to survive beside something with a name. By the 8th day, his rescue beacon finally broke through atmospheric interference. Dropships arrived hours later, fanning out with searchlights and armored troopers. As Marcus staggered into their arms, Kale bared his teeth at the soldiers, refusing to let them approach until Marcus whispered his name and placed a trembling hand against his neck. When they lifted Marcus onto the evac transport, Kale tried to jump into the cargo bay after him. Plasma rifles rose immediately, targeting the massive predator with charged lethality. Marcus struggled against his medics, shouting until his voice broke. Don't shoot him. He's with me. The wolf snarled at the shouting soldiers, ears pinned back, hackles raised. Its silver eyes darted between Marcus and the armed men. Its muscles bunched, ready to launch itself into the cargo bay despite the threat. Finally, the squad leader, a grizzled Marine with cybernetic eyes, lowered his rifle slightly. Sir, that thing is a goddamn killer. Marcus's voice cracked. He saved my life. If he dies, I swear on every grave you'll bury me in prison. Silence fell. Then the squad leader gestured sharply. Clear a space. Let the damn thing board. Kale leapt into the bay with an explosion of snow and ice, landing beside Marcus and immediately pressing his massive head against his chest. The medics shrank back, but Marcus wrapped his trembling arms around the dire wolf's thick neck, burying his face in frost-clumped fur. Kale's growl rumbled through his bones, vibrating his ribs like thunder. It was not a growl of threat. It was a growl of home. As the dropship lifted from the frozen wasteland, engines blazing against the endless snow's cape, Marcus knew something had been forged in that death-cold cave. Something no plasma leash, neural implant, or dominance training could replicate. It was loyalty. Raw, primal loyalty bound by survival and suffering. A bond between two predators who understood that trust was earned only in the shadow of death. And as Kale's silver eyes scanned the troopers in the bay, nostrils flaring with possessive threat, Marcus understood another truth. Kale would never allow harm to come to him again. Not from alien scavengers, not from the savage cold, and certainly not from the Galactic Council. Their war had only just begun. The silence of the Galactic Council chamber pressed down like a smothering blanket. Marcus remained kneeling beside Kale, his gloved fingers idly scratching behind the wolf's ears as the counselors whispered among themselves. Their words were hushed but carried through the amplifiers, echoing across the vaulted stone. He cannot control it. It is a liability. No, it is worse. It is an extension of him. Counselor Thrall raised a clawed hand, silencing the murmurs. His gold-flecked eyes studied Marcus with the same analytical disdain he reserved for dangerous curiosities. The reptilian male shifted his tail languidly over his throne steps, leaning forward to peer down at the human. Marcus Vane. You come before us today to plead for expanded frontier patrols against Hive Raider incursions. You claim humanity's Deathworlder detachments can secure our borders. And yet you bring this. His claw gestured at Kale with theatrical distaste. A savage animal capable of rending armored enforcers apart. Tell me, how do we know it will not turn on us the moment your leash slips? Marcus didn't rise. He let Kale's heavy head rest in his lap, silver eyes half closed in drowsy vigilance. His voice carried across the chamber, quiet but suffused with a lethal certainty that hushed the fidgeting aides and security guards. He doesn't wear a leash. Thrall's tongue flicked in agitation. That is exactly the problem. From the far end of the crescent dais, Counselor Orlan shifted in his bronze warplate. The tusked male, heavy-set and broad, adjusted the cables feeding oxygen into his lower gills before rumbling in deep basso tones. Perhaps, we should test this so-called loyalty, human. You claim it is no slave. That it chooses to protect you. Marcus's gaze locked onto Orlan's wide-set black eyes. He said nothing, but Kale's ears twitched forward, picking up the change in tone. His hackles rose subtly, dense fur rippling across his shoulders as he lifted his head, nostrils flaring to taste the shifting pheromones of fear and aggression. Orlan gestured to the guards flanking the chamber. Bring the training enforcers. The thick iron-banded doors at the rear opened with a resonant groan. 2 armored figures entered, each towering 3 meters tall, encased in reinforced exosuits with layered kinetic plating. Their visors glowed dull red as they stomped forward, shock spears clamped to their forearms, power cables trailing from their backs to external battery packs. The counselors sat back as the enforcers approached. Kale rumbled deep in his chest, eyes narrowing into silver slits as he rose to stand beside Marcus. His lips peeled back from his fangs in a silent snarl that showed incisors thick as knife blades. Marcus rose slowly, placing a hand against Kale's shoulder. The wolf trembled with barely contained fury, claws scraping against the marble floor, but he held his ground. Counselor Orlan gestured lazily with a tusked smile. Let us see if it will remain so docile under threat. The enforcers advanced. The first swung his shock spear around with mechanical precision, aiming the blunt electrified tip directly at Marcus's chest. The second positioned himself to flank Kale, spear crackling with lethal energy. Kale's body tensed, muscles coiling into lethal readiness. His ears pinned back against his skull, hackles bristling so high along his spine that they brushed Marcus's forearm. His jaws parted slightly, a deep, rolling snarl vibrating from deep within his chest like distant thunder. The first enforcer thrust his spear forward, jabbing Marcus directly in the chest plate. The electrified contact discharged with a bright blue flash, jolting his body backward. Kale exploded into motion. The wolf lunged with a roar that rattled the air. His massive jaws clamped down on the enforcer's forearm, crushing steel plating with a wet screech of tearing metal. The enforcer's spear clattered to the ground as Kale shook his head violently, wrenching the armored limb sideways until joints snapped like dry twigs. Sparks and hydraulic fluid sprayed across the marble. The second enforcer pivoted, spear raised, but Kale released the first and spun with predatory grace. He slammed into the enforcer's torso with his full weight, driving it backward into a supporting pillar. Stone cracked under the impact. The wolf's jaws locked onto the enforcer's throat plate, fangs punching through alloy and cables in a single savage bite. Sparks erupted from severed lines. The enforcer sagged limply, spear falling from nerveless fingers. Kale stepped back, muzzle dripping with oil and coolant. His snarls echoed off the chamber walls, eyes blazing molten silver. The first enforcer scrambled backward, his ruined arm hanging limp, visor flickering with internal errors. He lifted his remaining spear, but Marcus stepped forward, voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. Kale. Down. Instantly the wolf froze. His ears twitched and his snarling ceased mid-breath. He turned his massive head toward Marcus, chest heaving, blood-flecked saliva dripping from his fangs onto the polished floor. Slowly he lowered himself to the ground, resting his chin across his front paws. His tail curled protectively around Marcus's boots, and his eyes remained locked on the trembling enforcer. The silence in the chamber was total. Even the low hum of ventilation systems seemed to fade as dozens of alien eyes stared at Marcus and the creature that had just torn through two elite armored enforcers as if they were made of brittle glass. Counselor Thrall exhaled shakily, his scaled throat pulsing with each rapid swallow. "By the void," he whispered, unable to hide the tremor in his voice. That beast would die for him. Counselor Orlon leaned forward, tusks glinting under the chamber lights. "No," he rumbled softly, his deep voice echoing with dawning fear. "It would kill for him." Marcus reached down, resting his hand atop Kale's massive head. The wolf closed his eyes with a quiet huff, pressing into the touch with an almost feline affection. His breathing slowed, the predatory tension fading from his frame, but his ears remained angled forward, listening for the slightest threat. Marcus let his gaze sweep across the silent council chamber, taking in each face, each trembling aide, each guard gripping their rifle stocks with whitening knuckles. His eyes returned to Thrall's golden slits. "You wanted proof of what Deathworlders can bring to your borders? You wanted to see what loyalty forged in hell looks like? There it is." Thrall swallowed again, claws tapping in agitation against his throne's armrest. "You expect us to accept that thing into military operations?" Marcus's voice was quiet but carried a finality that left no room for debate. "You don't have to accept him. You just need to understand. If you want my command on your frontier, he comes with me." Kale lifted his head slightly, rumbling low in agreement. The sound vibrated through Marcus's armored boots, a silent echo of their shared will. For a long moment no one spoke. Then the avian counselor, feathers fluffed in anxious tension, raised her thin hand. "This council will convene a vote shortly. Until then, remove the enforcers from the chamber." Medical drones buzzed down from ceiling alcoves, spraying antiseptic foam over torn metal plating and hydraulic leaks as they extracted the limp armored bodies. The first enforcer, his ruined arms sparking, scrambled away from Kale's glare, visor flickering with panic overrides. Marcus turned his back on them, kneeling to meet Kale's gaze. The wolf sniffed at his chest plate where the shock spear had struck, as if checking for hidden wounds. His cold nose pressed against Marcus's collarbone, huffing softly before retreating with a flick of his ears. "Good boy," Marcus murmured, his voice tight with exhaustion and relief. "Easy." Kale closed his eyes and pressed his massive head into Marcus's chest, exhaling a warm gust of breath that smelled of metal and blood and frost. For a moment, the human and dire wolf sat alone in their silent cocoon of trust, surrounded by a galaxy that would never understand the bond forged between them. From his throne, Counselor Thrall watched with narrowed eyes, his claws curling against stone as unease prickled across his scales. Quietly to his aide, he rasped words that carried the sharp edge of fear. "That creature is not tamed. It is not trained. It is his equal. His brother." The aide swallowed, nodding mutely. Thrall let his gaze linger on Marcus's bowed head and the beast that guarded him. He felt the tremor in his chest, the primal certainty that whispered of doom. The Deathworlder bond was no leash of domination or coercion. It was something infinitely more dangerous. And as Marcus rose, Kale rising beside him like a silent storm given flesh, Thrall realized with a sinking certainty that if the council chose to cross them, they would not survive what came next. The dire wolf's silver eyes locked onto Thrall one last time, unblinking, unafraid. Then Marcus turned away, his hand resting lightly on Kale's thick fur as they waited for the council's verdict. Outside, lightning flickered across the polar sky, thunder booming like distant artillery. Inside, within the echoing silence of the great chamber, the ancient rulers of 10,000 star systems felt a new truth coil through their hearts. Deathworlders did not fight alone. They came with the monsters they called family. And in the quiet before the final vote, every counselor prayed to their forgotten gods that the humans' loyalty would remain unbroken. Because if it did not, no fortress in the galaxy would save them. The great chamber of the Galactic Council was silent save for the faint hum of energy shields and the labored breathing of anxious aides. Outside the high arched windows, dawn began to creep across the orbital horizon, painting pale gold along the carved obsidian walls. The counselors sat rigid upon their thrones, robes and armor casting long shadows in the dim morning light. Marcus stood in the center of the chamber, Kale pressed against his leg like a silent storm given form. The dire wolf's eyes flicked from face to face, each flicker a silent promise that if a single weapon rose against his human, death would follow before its wielder drew breath again. Counselor Thrall broke the silence. His scaled brow was furrowed, golden eyes narrowed with calculation as he tapped his claws on the armrest in measured rhythm. Human Marcus Vane, he rasped softly, each word echoing with the weight of millennia-old authority. "This council has deliberated your proposal for frontier command. You ask for tactical autonomy and diplomatic recognition as an allied Deathworlder commander. You offer protection against Hive Raider incursions, the elimination of Bloodclaw mercenary fleets, and the reclamation of our lost outer colonies." Marcus remained silent. Kale shifted his stance, brushing his massive head against Marcus's hip before settling again, tail curling protectively around his boots. Thrall leaned forward, eyes gleaming under the flickering chamber lights. "We do not question your capabilities. We question your control." Marcus's voice was quiet but carried the immovable certainty of glaciers grinding stone into dust. "I do not control him." A ripple of unease swept through the gathered counselors. The avian representative shifted her talons anxiously on her crystal perch. Counselor Orlon flexed his thick fingers around the handle of his ceremonial warhammer, tusks flaring in restless irritation. Thrall's tongue flicked, tasting the air as if parsing its silent currents for weakness. "Then what assurance do we have that this creature will obey our commands? That it will not turn upon our citizens at a whim?" Marcus raised his head, meeting Thrall's gaze without fear. "You have no assurance. Because he doesn't obey you. He chooses to follow me." Kale rumbled softly at his words, the vibration rolling through the marble floor and rattling delicate data consoles along the dais. The wolf's silver eyes locked onto Thrall with cold, unblinking focus. Thrall's scaled brow twitched with the first flicker of genuine fear. His gaze darted to the other counselors, searching for support. He found only silent tension and downcast eyes. The avian counselor finally spoke, her fluting voice trembling despite her efforts to remain poised. "We have seen what it does to enforcers in a controlled demonstration. What happens if it feels threatened in a civilian environment? What happens when fear drives it to violence no command can halt?" Marcus inhaled slowly, feeling the weight of Kale's presence beside him, the heat of living muscle and savage loyalty. His eyes softened as he looked down at the wolf, remembering frostbitten nights in ice caves and the scent of blood freezing upon iron blades. "He will not harm the innocent," he said softly. "He knows the difference between prey and threat." Counselor Orlon leaned forward, tusks gleaming under the rising dawn. "And if the threat is us?" Marcus turned his gaze upon Orlon, his eyes narrowing to pale shards of winter sky. For a moment no soldier stood there. No diplomat, no hired Deathworlder mercenary. Only a man carved by war, honed by ice and blood and survival in the silent places where death reigned absolute. "Then," he said, each word etched with unbreakable finality, "I suggest you do not become one." Kale's lips curled back from his fangs in a silent snarl, a flicker of protective rage flashing through his eyes before he settled once more, tail thumping against the marble with quiet menace. Silence stretched long and brittle across the chamber. The counselors shifted uncomfortably, their ceremonial robes rustling like dry leaves in a restless breeze. Finally, Thrall let out a slow, rasping exhale, his claws clacking against stone as he gestured to his aide. The young Zalith male stepped forward with trembling hands, presenting a polished black data slate upon which flickered the official seal of the Galactic Council. "This council," Thrall began, his voice strained with reluctant authority, "grants Marcus Vane command of the 1st Frontier Defense Expeditionary Force, with full tactical autonomy and diplomatic recognition as an allied Deathworlder commander." A tremor of relief and tension shivered through Marcus's frame, though his face remained unreadable. Kale tilted his head upward, silver eyes flickering with a brief, pleased rumble as Marcus took the slate in his gloved hand. Thrall continued, his words dripping with grudging concession. "You will deploy within 48 standard hours. Your objective is the reclamation of the Perdition's Reach outpost colonies from Hive Raider occupation. Your success will dictate the permanence of this arrangement." Marcus nodded once, sliding the slate into his tactical belt. "Understood." Thrall leaned forward, scales rippling as his voice dropped to a dangerous purr. "And Marcus Vane, know this. Should your creature harm a single innocent life under council jurisdiction, we will hunt you both to the edges of the galactic rim and beyond." Marcus met his gaze without blinking. "If that day comes, you will need more than threats." Kale shifted forward, massive head lowering until his silver eyes locked with Thrall's unblinking stare. The wolf's breath rolled across the reptilian counselor in slow, deliberate huffs that smelled faintly of blood and iron. A low, rattling growl vibrated from his chest, not loud, but enough to rattle Thrall's teeth in his skull. Thrall swallowed hard, flicking his tongue nervously as he leaned back into his throne. Marcus laid a hand atop Kale's massive skull. The wolf's growl faded instantly, replaced by a quiet whine of contentment as he pressed against Marcus's touch. In that moment, the galaxy's oldest rulers saw something that hollowed out their hearts with a cold, primal fear. They saw devotion. True, feral, unstoppable devotion. A loyalty forged in death and silence, bound not by fear or pain or implanted obedience but by a silent pact spoken only between predators who understood the world without words. Marcus turned away from them without further acknowledgement. His boots rang against the marble as he walked toward the chamber doors. Kale fell into step beside him, hulking body brushing against his leg with each stride, massive head held high, ears flicking back and forth in watchful vigilance. The towering iron doors opened with a thunderous groan, revealing the long obsidian causeway beyond, lined with armored guards who stepped back instinctively as Kale's silver gaze swept over them. As they reached the threshold, Marcus paused, feeling the warmth of dawn upon his face. He looked down at Kale, who lifted his muzzle to scent the rising breeze, nostrils flaring with primal awareness. "Ready for another war, old friend?" Marcus murmured. Kale huffed softly, tongue lolling out for a brief moment before he let out a deep, rolling rumble that vibrated through the stone beneath their feet. It was not a growl of threat. It was an answer, spoken in the language of blood and snow and bone. Together, they stepped into the rising dawn. Behind them, within the silent chamber of the Galactic Council, Thrall sat unmoving, staring after the departing figures with slitted eyes wide in dawning horror. His aide shifted nervously beside him, voice trembling. "Counselor, what troubles you?" Thrall exhaled a shaky breath, feeling sweat bead under his scales despite the chamber's frigid temperature. "We have not allied with a man and his beast," he whispered. "We have unleashed a force of nature. May the gods help us all if we ever give them a reason to turn against us." Outside, the rising sun lit the obsidian towers in blazing gold. The storm clouds gathered upon the horizon like silent sentinels. And as Marcus Vane and Kale walked shoulder to shoulder down the silent causeway, their shadows merged as one. The galaxy would soon learn that Deathworlders never fought alone. They brought their monsters with them. And for those who dared stand in their way there would be no mercy.